Change the face of the entertainment industry. Production companies are looking to hire you on accessrealworld.ca, North America's largest hiring and networking database for Canadian Black, Indigenous, and people of color creatives. Get hired at accessrealworld.ca.
Hi, everybody. Tensei Kakio. Thanks for being here. I'm Danis Goulet. I'm a writer and director, and I'm Cree Metis, originally from northern Saskatchewan. And I am coming to you today from Toronto, which is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, and the Anishinaabe. So thanks for being here, and also like to introduce Fawzia.
Hi, thank you so much, Danis. My name is Fawzia Mirza. I am a writer-director, and I am sitting here in Los Angeles, California today, the territory of the Tongva people. And I'm really excited to have this conversation and both get to know you better and also just connect about like our journeys as filmmakers and creators. And I feel like you've had different lives the way I have had different lives prior to being in this position. So I'm super excited to talk.
Yeah, me too. And I actually just brings me to, I guess, my first question, which is like when you talk about those different lives, tell us a little bit about that and how your journey was coming into film.
Yeah, I mean, okay, my journey was deeply circuitous. So I was a lawyer for 3 years, and I did that. I went to law school to make my family happy. I was raised in a fairly conservative Muslim Pakistani family, born in Ontario, but lived in Sydney, Cape Breton, Nova Scotia for a long time before my family moved to the United States. But yeah, they wanted me to get an education, do something with my life. I did law school. I wasn't sure really why or what I wanted to do. And it was actually my last year of law school where I took a class called trial advocacy, which is really doing closing and opening arguments and learning the rules of evidence in a courtroom. And that compelled me to take an acting class. And I'd done some of that when I was younger, and I'd done plays and was in the speech team and was in the band. But that moment really compelled me to take an acting class where I was in law school in Chicago. I took it, I loved it, but I also was finishing law school. So I took the bar exam and promised myself that no matter what happened, I would pursue a career as an actor on a lawyer's debt. So I passed the bar and got a job as a lawyer at a small firm, and simultaneously while I was lawyering by day was taking acting and improv and comedy classes at night to learn this craft, and eventually started I left after 3 years and started doing comedy educational performance work in rape prevention to colleges and military installations around the world. And then eventually started writing my own material as an actor because there just weren't many roles for one of my identities, much less all of them. And in the last 2 years have shifted from being a writer actor to a writer director because I really found that, storytelling, I was already in all of the parts of the storytelling, in the edit room, in the casting, but just didn't feel like I was supposed to be a filmmaker because I didn't have a theater degree or a film degree or a director degree, and I didn't understand how the camera worked. And finally just said, oh, but I think it's just time. And so now the last 2 years have been directing my work and excited for all the things that come after that. Tell me about you, because I know you have had so many lives. And actually my wife, who used to run the film festival, Inside Out Film Festival in Toronto, Inside Out, was like, oh yeah, Danis has done everything and is such an icon and was excited for us to chat. So I'd love to hear about the lives you've led in before arriving. You've had such an incredible 2 years. Of course, we know that nothing happens overnight, but so I'd love to hear about your lives prior to Night Raiders.
Yeah, I feel like it's been a long journey, but something that you just said really struck me, which was I didn't think I was supposed to be a filmmaker. And I think we go on so many journeys to come. And I don't know why, it's like so I grew up in Saskatchewan, and it's like there was no idea that film could be a career. Like I knew, I guess, that people did that somewhere, but it like did not feel like a viable path for me. And my parents were both educators. They had backgrounds in education. So I was like fully expected to go to university. And I instead went backpacking. Like I did the like, oh, it'll only be a year kind of thing. And I ended up staying away for 2. And then I came back to Canada. My parents were like, well, now it's time to talk about university. And that was always the track that I was going to go on. And about a month after being home, I had this fluky moment where I got hired by Tasha Hubbard, who's an amazing documentary filmmaker. And she hired me onto my first film set, which was this huge deal at the time because Saskatchewan didn't really have much of an industry, but they created a tax credit. And then suddenly there was this CBC miniseries shooting in Saskatchewan, and I got my first job on a set. And it was like day one, it was just like the lights went off, and I was like, this is it. This is amazing. This is what I want to do. And so I did not go to film school. I did not go to university. I just like tracked right into film. But even in those early days, I really didn't think that I could be a director. Like, I don't think it was in my consciousness. And when that switched is I started working in the casting department, like, so first out there and then here in Toronto. And I had this moment in the casting room where we were on the team for casting this US television pilot. And there's like this Indian princess type of character, like a Pocahontas, that like walks out over a waterfall, doesn't say anything, silent, and then stoically sacrifices herself.
Oh
And
my
I had
God.
to watch. Yeah, it's like the worst, right? Like this is like,
Oh.
and so I'm sitting in this chair watching all of these amazing Indigenous actors walk into the room, and that's the role that they were coming out for. And that's the best thing that they could do with an Indigenous woman on screen. And I remember just like feeling so much shame because, it was like I was a part of the machine that was putting this out into the world. And I realized that like the power lied in the people telling the stories, writing the stories, and that the actors, by the time it got to them, they can find their own agency in the characters, but the thing has already been created. And so I dropped everything and went to New York and took a film workshop and like made a little black and white 16 millimeter film. And then I got involved with imagineNATIVE, the festival. And then I had lived this life as like a festival person and eventually went to TIFF, but then always kept making my shorts and features along the way. But I also wanted to ask you about, like, I guess, what were some of the early challenges for you as you were kind of switching, like to go from being a lawyer to an actor is like super radical, and you're carrying this debt, as you mentioned, like how did, like, because I feel like some of my early barriers were just like that I didn't, like there was nothing in the universe, I feel, that told me that I could do this. And I was like a very like confident, like outgoing young person. It's not that so it's really interesting that it was just like, I can, like, the only thing that made me become a director was because I was angry about representation. And I was just like, who else is going to do this? And I looked around and I was like, well, I guess I'm going to try. And I have no idea if I can do this. But I'm curious about how you, like, what that transition was. And then also, what some of the challenges were.
I mean, I have to tell you that honestly, in some ways, the anger serves because and I feel that even like now, both the anger and the commitment and the, okay, well, I guess if people are going to see me as like the Muslim woman slash gender expansive person, auntie, uncle, who talks about being queer all the time, then I'm going to embrace that. And I will be that person. And someone has to be that person. And I will unapologetically talk about gay people constantly in the Muslim community, outside of the Muslim community, and ensure that there is space for this community, no matter what anybody says, and that we deserve a full life as much as anybody else. And so that has really helped me embrace like directing as my path. And then I'd say the transition, honestly, there was some sort of fearlessness of youth, and fearlessness of like, I just didn't think about the consequences or what it meant. And, I think I did carry, I come from, I have my privileges, whether it was, my family helped me, even though I was in law school, that they helped me with where I lived. I went to college, got a degree. I went to university. I didn't have to pay for that. So I didn't have that debt. My family wanted me to pursue a higher education and a higher degree, but I also had the privilege of leaving that behind. I think it's a mindset that, not everybody has. And so, my father was a physician. My sister was an architect. My brother went to med school as well. So there was sort of this both expectation, but I really think I also had the privilege of leaving those expectations behind and choosing something else and being like, it'll be fine. Why? I don't know. Like if I were to do it again, I'd probably be like, why don't you pay your law school debt first? Why don't you take it's okay. But also it just sort of was the path. And I really think for me, the other added layer was coming out. I didn't come out, whatever that means. I didn't come out to I guess myself or community. I didn't start going to gay bars until I was like 29. And then I didn't tell my mother that I had been living with a girlfriend, not just my roommate, until I was 33. So it's like there's so many, and then I wasn't sort of really out until later. So it's like there's so many processes that embracing of my identity added to my confusion of who I was, but also the confusion of my work. And I think, so it's always trying to find like that. And so truly, at this point and in the last few years, I'd say as I've grounded in who I am, unapologetically about who I am, who I love, and for me, grounded in my relationship with my wife and my partner and my creative collaborator, I can say that I am a director. I am a writer. I am a gay Muslim woman and gender expansive person. And that is my genre. Of all the things. So it's complicated,
Yeah, no, I love everything that you're saying because it is about like that, the fact that, like I think anyone who comes from a marginalized community, it's like you sometimes don't understand, like you don't realize you're on the margins in a way. Like I have white passing privileged, I'm mixed, I grew up in a middle class family. And so it takes actually a process of understanding the ways that in which you've either internalized racism or internalized, like or sexism or so many of these things. So to actually be declarative in that way holds a lot of power, and to be unapologetic. Like we absolutely need to take up space, and not only to give ourselves permission to do it, but to like declare it so. And I think that's really powerful. And I think it also like, comes through in the voice of the films that you've made. Like I love how much energy there is in your films and how much color there is, and just like like it's got such a, you know, your films have such a beautiful kind of like, just like, I don't know, they're just like sparkling with energy. And I think like now that I speak to you, it all makes so much sense. And you know, I wanted to ask you too about your use of comedy too, because I feel like comedy is such a powerful vehicle of like inviting people into these spaces. And I want to know like what drew you to that, and like how you chose comedy, or maybe you felt like it was inherent. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, growing up in Sydney, Nova Scotia, I was one of the few non-white people um, that I knew of in my school that I was connected to, and non-Christian people that I was connected to, or that was in my school, and so I was sort of always using comedy as a way to survive and make people laugh with me and not at me. And like, I didn't celebrate Christmas, and we were the dark house when everyone had their lights up, and I didn't have anything for show and tell. And so it was just a way to survive. And eventually, it was actually through the work I did doing sexual violence prevention work, where I saw the impact that comedy had on people of all ages. And that I realized, like, this is not just fun and joy. This is a tool. And I have to use this as a tool. And this is a way where, you know, it kind of unlocks a part of your brain where you stop being really critical of communities, and you just sort of enjoy and laugh and come to some other kind of emotional space. And then we can have bigger conversations. Then we're able to potentially see and connect at another plane, in another way. And so that was for me really important. Well, and I feel as though, well, and comedy is awesome. It is truly, to me, like a marvel. And I often am like thinking, like with the Oscars, you know, coming up as well, I'm just like, man, there's so much power in comedy. I look forward to the time where the highest levels also look to great comedic films using comedy as a tool. And, you know, Taika Waititi to me is like one of the greatest, you know, knows how to wield that tool so incredibly, and is somebody I look up to as a creator. And I was looking at your work and thinking of like, you know, we think about the journeys we're on, and it's like, we want to be like, oh, well, I met this awesome person. How do I work with them right now? But like, you met Taika, you know, a long time ago, before you worked with him and before he was an EP on Night Raiders. I'd love to talk a little bit about like your journey, not just with him, but just like finding these collaborators that have helped you and been sort of creative folks you can turn to and bring on board your projects along the way.
Yeah, I think it all comes back to community, you know, and I think when you first come in to the industry, everyone is emphasizing the industry, you know, like it's a business. You got to
Yeah.
go to networking events and meet very important people. And all of that may be true, but to me, like what has saved me and also like let me actually stay at this over a long period of time is community. And it was coming into imagineNATIVE in the early 2000s, which I was sort of disillusioned with casting at the time. And I met this amazing group of people one night at the opening night of Hot Docs. You know, I got involved with imagineNATIVE, and it opened me up to this incredible community of Indigenous creators that was a global community that were all driven by like a very similar agenda. And that was my greatest education. Like I watched films from all over the world that Indigenous filmmakers were making. And I feel like I didn't go to film school, but I almost like gained a master's in Indigenous film, and that was the ground that I was standing on as a filmmaker. It was the lens that I saw everything through. And then, you know, like I watched all kinds of other movies, of course, like foreign films and from all over the world and whatever's being made every year. But that my ground and my perspective was as an Indigenous filmmaker. And I feel like often people say, oh, I don't want to be like a female filmmaker or like an Indigenous filmmaker. I only want to be a filmmaker. And it's like, I understand the craving for like a kind of freedom, but the fact is that like, to me, sometimes that freedom is sort of like that idea that, you know, it's like the freedom that white men have always had. And to
Mhm.
me, I don't crave that freedom. I actually
Mhm.
crave being responsible and in a
Mhm.
reciprocal relationship that is in a constant conversation with my community,
Oh
whether
my
it's as an audience member or like in my peers. And I feel like the people I've grown up with, who were my peers at the time in the early 2000s, like these are the people that are like a community, and the things that they've given me, and like whether it's business advice or whatever, has been way more valuable than anything that that very important person at a networking event can give you. Like, yes, it's a funder. For sure, go talk to them. Talk to them about your project. Yes, prep your pitches, do all of the business things. But I think for anyone who's not like had an automatic entry point into the industry for whatever reason, for whatever privilege, it's like we need to support each other, lean on each other. And like I met Taika because we both had shorts at Sundance in like 2004, and there was like this community that would meet up on the festival circuit, and then he came up to imagineNATIVE. But it's also where I met this whole group of incredible women, especially that have in just like inspired me completely, like Tasha Hubbard, Zoe Lee Hopkins, Carolyn Monet, Lisa Jackson, Alethea Arnacook Barrel. Like the list goes on. Like our communities are just so rich. And when we hit challenges, it's like where you really go to make that phone call where you're like, I don't know what to do. What did you do? What is that? And that kind of support is really what keeps us going, I think.
I am obsessed with everything you said. I just and I truly, because it's like I have, you know, really transparently, like I struggle when I hear, and I again I also understand the reason for wanting not to be seen as a Muslim filmmaker or a woman filmmaker or a queer filmmaker because of the siloing or the pigeonholing that happens because of capitalism in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do I sell you? You know, I can't sell that. I can sell this over here. I can sell whiteness. I can sell straight white male cisness is essentially
Mm-hmm.
what I'm
Yep.
saying. And so I also like, sure, I'm a filmmaker, but like my lens is so, that is my lens, is my queerness and my Muslimness and my brownness and all of these things. And I love that as well. Like, I don't want to give it up. And have found that the more I dig into those spaces, the better I not only feel, but the more I feel sure of what I'm doing. And so I love you talking about that. And I think it's such an important lesson that I know I have learned about, you know, when you're at an event, when you're at a party, when you're on a Zoom, in a Zoom club, and you're like, oh yeah, oh, the head of Netflix is here, or like, oh, HBO
Yeah.
president. It's like the desire is to go meet them, sure. And like that is one thing that one can do to network, but like
Mm-hmm. Yep.
that lateral space, that community space is really the space that is deep, that is important, that is really who you're going to be both working with and like probably will be the decision makers, will run the studio one day, will be the person who will be like, oh my God, I love you. I'm so glad 10 years later I get to buy your movie. Like, and it's
Yeah.
amazing.
No, no, and that's just it, is like, you know, I think capitalism teaches us that that lateral group are the people that you're competing with. And I think I constantly like check myself for those types of like feelings or whatever, because like I never wanted to come into this space to be the only one. And part of what's taken so long for me to like finally get to making my first feature and getting it out into the world was the amount of advocacy that had to be done. Like there was a point where I spent a year writing a report about the lack of Indigenous feature film production in Canada, or, like, and that kind of advocacy takes a lot, takes time and effort. And I just always felt like if we could expand out and then bring as many people, but going like this is a slower movement than you as an individual, like leaping ahead. And I think that we're so taught that success is measured by, like how far an individual gets, and that also that's what's celebrated. And I just keep thinking about, how richer we all are, when we embrace all of the things that we bring, as filmmakers from our different vantage points and experiences.
Yes. And of course, I'm going to be like, and that's social media. But it's like, of course, we live in a culture now where it's commodified even further. And it's like the number of likes you get, how many followers do you have? Like, how many views do you have on that TikTok? Like, can I buy it? And, I know that, the strongest place I am in who I am and what I'm creating is when I have perspective about the fact that Hollywood is a pyramid scheme. And of course, I'm choosing to be in this world, but it's really helpful to see it for what it is. It's still a system, and it's still a system that like has all the same ups and downs and struggles of all the other systems that we're trying to change and break apart and shift the narratives of. And when you see that, then it's like, okay, now I can sit back a little bit more and be patient and know that this takes time. And I have to tell you, my dad was a very patient person, and I did not grow up a very patient person. I've learned the patience, and it is truly one of the greatest things that I have been learning. And that is through which the greatest things are coming. And it's like, oh my God, this relationship I made 10 years ago, that person is now like, hey, I'm so glad to see what you're doing. Like, let's talk. And it's truly remarkable. And I'm so grateful to be like, seeing some of those things happen, and not just because of the work, but just of seeing your life, and that it's like there's an A side and a B side to like everything you plant in your writing, or hopefully there is. And there's an A side and a B side to like our lives and the relationships we build. And some of them are work, and some of them are also just like community and joy. And wow, this became like one of my best friends. I also just have to say, Lisa Jackson is awesome. We got to meet, I did the TIFF Screenwriters Studio Writer's Studio in 2020, the week of the pandemic breaking. And we got to meet and spend time together in person right before everything was shelter in place. And I was like, wow, this human being is an incredible person and filmmaker and visionary. So that's my shout out. Lisa.
Yeah, no, Lisa's amazing. Like her brain like blows me away, and I love spending time with her, and it's just a delight to like tap into the way she thinks about the world. And also with so much heart. Yes, shout out Lisa any day.
Shout out Lisa. Can you tell me about your first short, or what, maybe whatever feels comfortable in terms of sharing, like, the first creative project, or which of those shorts where you were like, I need to make something, I need to direct it, I want to write it, I want to tell the story. Could you talk a little bit? Because I know there's several that you've made. And as someone who's like clearly deeply starting as a director in the short film space, I feel like it's so exciting to hear, what that was for you. I know you talked a little bit about the being in the casting process, but what about as a director, writer, what that was like for you?
Yeah, I think first off, I think making shorts is amazing. And I know that we're all taught to have our eyes on the feature as the prize or whatever, but there is so much that you learn with every short that, at least for me, every short that I've made, I've learned so much that by the time I went to make Night Raiders, which was a really crazily ambitious first feature with like 150 VFX shots and like world building and like all kinds of crazy stuff going on. So by the time I got there, I feel like every short prepared me for what that was going to be. And the very first thing I ever made was when I ran off to New York in that workshop and made a little black and white thing that was actually a little comedy about a guy who goes into a record store and he's too embarrassed to buy the thing that he really wants, which is not widely available. But then after that, I made a short that I got an Arts Council grant to make, and I was so happy. And it was also supposed to be like this funny little identity film about a girl who's like very declarative and she's like an activist. But it sort of had all of these like ironic representation touch points, like flute music, which I get just a kick out of anytime it's on screen. An Indigenous person walks in and it's like loo loo loo. So anyway, I was playing with all of that, but I didn't really direct it in the right way. So people didn't understand that it was a comedy, and it played more for drama. And so it failed. And I was like super just like, oh my God, I didn't make a good short. And it was like, it was, yeah, I just was upset. But that failure actually was also such a key learning. Like I realized that I didn't direct the actor for comedy. I was directing, like she was a good actor, but she was playing it in a dramatic and sort of earnest way. And so therefore it comes across as dramatic and earnest when it's actually supposed to be tongue in cheek and funny and sort of like making fun of the things that she's doing. And so that was a huge learning. And so after I made that film and felt like it didn't work out, I made a film called Wapawika, which I really consider in earnest to be my first film. And it's about a father and son that go to their cabin for the first time. And it's a Cree dad and his son who's a hip hop artist. And it was about the intergenerational disconnect between the father and the son. And I threw everything about making films that I thought I knew away. Like I'd sort of done my previous short in all of the ways you're supposed to do it, and I had this big crew and like I was doing the things. But for Wapawika, I just like went to my family's cabin. I asked my own family to act in a scripted drama, even though it was like, wasn't at all a documentary, but we shot it more like a documentary with like one camera and like a tiny 5-person crew, and just spent 5 days at my cabin shooting this movie. And then that was the movie that I really hit the festival circuit with. It went to like TIFF, Berlin, and Sundance. And then suddenly it was like, I just made a film where it like got all this recognition. And I don't know if I was yet calling myself a filmmaker. I think I was just like, wow, I wanted to try this thing and see if it would work. And I wanted to try it in my own way, So I just sort of like really experimented with like non-actors who were family members and a small crew and like an intimate shooting environment and a place that I know and love and like out on the land and just like the way that I want to make it. And then I made another film in my hometown called Barefoot. And I really wanted to sort of like lean into style. And so it's like, I feel like on every film I tackle something new, and that I tell myself that I don't know if it's going to work, but it's just an experiment. And then it kind of protects me from like having to have this pressure of like, I'm a director making a film. And, like, it's just like, yeah, I'm just going to try this experiment and let's see if it works. So I'll change things about the process or like lean into certain things and like, and see if it works. And then I sort of made Barefoot, and then I made WAKENING, which was my first genre film. So it was a monster movie. So again, like a total departure from all of my previous work. And then WAKENING really was like the ground that Night Raiders was built on, as like this genre movie set in the near future, but like dealing with, like things like colonization. So yeah, that was sort of like the like my process with the shorts. And I'd love to hear about your shorts as well, and like how you found making your first one, and then as you like maybe or like things you learned along the way?
Well, I have to say, I really appreciate your sharing this idea of like, there's a way you're supposed to make a short with this crew and this thing. And I think that I agree. There's like this idea of how it's supposed to be done and what it's supposed to look like and da da da. And the bigger the crew, the better the thing, and I really appreciate hearing you say you were like, I want to take that pressure off and kind of allow it to be what I need it to be and whatever it wants to be, which feels really beautiful. And it, I would say, and I feminine, like a very different way of looking at like a camera and a process in a really organic way feels freeing and cool and exciting, and something that I'm going to hold on to as I, continue to grow in my work. Yeah, I mean, shorts for me, even when I wasn't directing them, I made officially my first short film. I was co-director on it with another filmmaker named Ryan Logan, like 10 years ago in 2012. And I had sort of, I knew I was like, I want to tell a story and I wanted to be these things happen. And then he was like, well, here's how we can make it a movie. And I was like, okay, cool. Versus an art gallery piece. And I was like, okay, great. Lovely. And it did well in the festival circuit. It was 3 minutes long, called The Queen of My Dreams. But what I really learned was how I can make things that I have access to. I can make things with the people I have access to, the places I have access to, what's free, what can I, like I have this room, I have this room, I have this, someone will let me use their restaurant, but it was really contained is always the way I've thought about it. And I know, part of what I'm thinking about is how can I both still, not throw away the things that have worked for me, but how can I now expand? And not necessarily going to like, now we have 16 locations, but allowing myself to expand into whatever is meant to be. The first short that I've, as I've calling myself a director in the last 2 years, was something called Noor and Layla. And, we had a tiny little bit of money from CBC and they'd given it to me right before the pandemic. And then the pandemic happened. And then I was like, oh my God, this movie is kind of a pandemic movie about a woman going through this struggle. I think I have to change it. And so then I knew I wanted to make a film. Noor and Layla is very much about two queer Muslim women of color having 5 moments of their relationship marked by the Muslim call to prayer 5 times a day. We see these moments. And I just really want, in terms of how I embrace myself and my identity as a queer Muslim woman and person, you can see how my lens also embraces those identities through that work. And, it's like, well, why is the call to prayer always associated like with terrorism and somebody about to murder somebody? Why can't it be associated with a meet cute between 2 lovers to be? Why can't we reclaim these rituals? For me, queering the rituals is also taking them out of the terror tropes. And normalizing them, not just for queer people, but for all Muslim people. I recognize that there's many straight Muslim people that don't see it that way, but that is the way I perceive it and see it and how it is for all of us. It was a really small film that we shot in September 2020 in Toronto with these 2 incredible humans who were one is a non-actor who actually first started giving me my mullet haircut in Toronto. Casting was also an experience because I was like, how do I find folks who are Muslim who also feel comfortable being intimate on camera? We saw some Muslim actors, some non-Muslim actors. We cast a Muslim actor and 1 non-Muslim actor because that was who had the greatest chemistry, because ultimately we also wanted that connection between the two actors to matter. So we made that. It's still touring the festival circuit. And then I got into a program that is Paul Feig, who made Bridesmaids. His company, Powder Keg, has like a women writer director incubator program. And so I'd gotten into that, but that also got kind of pushed because of the pandemic. So we shot that finally in September of 2021, and it will world premiere in Aspen at the Aspen Shorts Fest. It's called Auntie, next month in April, which is exciting. But it's like always, I'm definitely always trying something new, and always centering brownness, Muslimness, queerness, womanness, to shift. And, you know, also now age, you know, what is, you know, I'm not 25. And so how is, you know, a 39-year-old woman or a 40-year-old woman, what is she learning from like someone who's 20 years old or 22 years old? And what is that intergenerational storytelling as well? And it's not just, and as a queer person, I'm just like, damn, y'all know a lot at 15.
I know, it's so crazy because the younger generation now are just so open. Like my daughter is 12 and I can't believe the handle that she has on both herself and her identity that is like would have never existed in the generation that we grew up in. And I'm certainly not 25 either. And I really loved that intergenerational play in Auntie, and I loved that character, and she was a great comedic actor as well. But I also want to just jump back to one thing you said about your first short, which is that, you know, some of the idea, like I think it's so beautiful, all of those elements that you brought together of like prayer and ritual, and in this queer space of like embracing this, like, you know, stunning couple. And but that those, I, you know, even the presence of that film would obviously be challenging to some in your community. And I want to just ask you about when you make work that is a challenge to your own community, what that's like for you, and also if you've ever had a difficult situation because of it.
Oh my gosh, great question, Danis. Yes, yes, yes. It's you know, the very first short that I made 10 years ago was a very public conversation about a very private struggle about whether I could be queer, Muslim, and excuse me, whether I could be queer, Muslim, and love Bollywood romance all at the same time. And it was one of those shorts where if I didn't make it, I felt like I would die. Like I didn't know how to process what I was experiencing about my internal struggle and conflict. And so since then, what I have seen, and I've, you know, the answer I came to is yes, I can. And, you know, I've found peace within myself. I've found since then that the community, all the communities will always have opinions about me, whether it's my queer community not really fully understanding Muslimness, whether it's Muslim community or my family not understanding queerness or gayness and wanting me to stop being so loud, wanting me to stop talking about gayness. Like, okay, fine, do that, but can you just do it over there quietly? And so I have found that I need to have had to create my own identity, piece together who I am, and I'm not going to let go of it. I'm not going to stop calling myself Muslim because it makes anyone feel uncomfortable, and transcend all of that and just create this space where I feel safe. Yes, there's plenty of hate and death threats and anti-Muslim, anti-gay, anti the combination of all of the things, from haters, from also like even within Hollywood, I've gotten questions. Can you be gay and Muslim? And what I
Wow.
found is that just means I need to keep doing and being. So the affront is to the identity. And so I had to be comfortable enough in my identity that then I could just make the work, but also the work allowed me to be comfortable in my identity. And so the more I make and the more I put out there, the more that I see that it's not, and it's not just for gay Muslims. It's like the more folks were like, oh my gosh, yes, this also applies to me in my community, and like the struggle we have over here, or like my mom is, or my daughter, I struggle with having this conversation with my daughter. And it's like, it's just a reminder that keep making and keep trusting who you are and what you're doing. And I ground in love and kindness. The comedy for me is my way of loving and my way of having those really difficult conversations. And the comedy actually is a way for me to be loud. Gosh, it's so tough because it's still a struggle. And it is, if there are straight Muslims who feel uncomfortable when they listen to me, like even listening to this conversation, I would challenge you to think about, why do you not think it's important for our safety, for us to be safe, right? Because the more you question it, it's like the more you're creating a lack of safe space for folks who are different than you. And that is actually what the mainstream Muslim community is fighting out there. And if that safety, you also have to fight for the safety of those within.
Oh my God, that's so moving and inspiring, everything that you just said. So thank you for all of that. It was so great.
And I just feel like we have to talk about Night Raiders and the importance of this film, and also like the work that you do, like why this film matters so much. Because I know it's broken boundaries, like, for you in personal storytelling in the community, but also, in Canada, in Indigenous storytelling film history, it has broken boundaries. Could you talk a little bit about that trajectory and why it's so important?
Yeah, I think, one thing that you just said, I don't think, when you go out to make something that it's like, oh, I'm going to break all of these things. It's more just like that I wanted to have a way, and you just said it so beautifully, you want to hold and talk about difficult things. And when you're doing that and you know that it's going to be uncomfortable, how are the ways to invite people into that? And you said that, comedy is a way of doing that for you. And that makes so much sense to me. And I also think there's something protective about comedy. And that's sort of how I felt about placing the story in the near future and fictionalizing it and turning it into a genre film. For all of those reasons, that in this package, it might invite people to come into this space and to hold this difficult thing. And so and also that I felt that in the genre, I felt more free as a filmmaker. And it's so funny that you said in comedy, I could be loud, because I felt like in the genre space, I could almost hit what I wanted to say harder, because no one can say you're constrained by reality. It's like, oh, it really wasn't that bad. And it's like, well, I'm creating this world. I'm going to like make it just as bad as I want it to be. And that, but the thing about Night Raiders is that everything in it is real and already happened. It's just that people deny that history. And so when you put it all in one movie, that like Indigenous people in Canada were subjected to like the restriction of freedom of movement, or like communities were wiped out because of a virus, or of course the residential schools where children were taken away. I just wanted people to imagine, what would it be like if you lost a child, and that system was in place here for 7 generations of Indigenous families. Like, it's baffling, and it's so big and overwhelming that you need to sort of have a way for people to come into it. And I think for any of those difficult spaces, like, we come up with these ways of like inviting people into the space and holding it in a certain way. But yeah, it was a huge undertaking of course, and like I felt deeply challenged by the process on many different fronts. So, but it was amazing to do it, and I had been holding it, like I started writing it in 2013. So, it was again, it's like that process of being slow. And I had this incredible producer, Tara Woodbury, who never like let us go out before it was ready, and I think that's a thing, like everyone wants to get out with their feature, and it really benefits to just stay focused on the creative until you like, and having someone guide that process was so valuable for me, to just be like, it might have been frustrating for me to hear at times, like, yeah, let's go out with it, and she's like, not yet, not yet. Because I found writing very challenging. I find the isolation of it very challenging. So that was, it was great.
Well,
To
oh, sorry. I will,
yeah,
and
no, go ahead.
well, and it's like having that collaborator that help. I mean, honestly, I could ask you a million more questions because I'm obsessed with collaboration, and I love hearing the stories of, that sounding board, or that person, and that kind of like back and forth, and how it works. But I know we only have a little bit of time left, and I do want to ask you. I mean, I had the great privilege of seeing Night Raiders in the theater at TIFF, and it was an incredible experience. And I knew I was watching something that was special. And I sometimes hate using that word, but it was really important to me to get to watch that film in Toronto at that moment. And it felt like both a moment for Indigenous community and you and your film, and for also being in the pandemic and getting to share and watch film collectively. It was a moment in time. And I also felt like TIFF was really incredible because Canadian filmmakers were really spotlighted in a way that felt incredible as well, and not overshadowed, and really got to have this moment. So can you tell me, I also was like, this should be a TV show. Felt that. Could you talk about what else you have done? I feel like there's super exciting things happening for you. I don't know what you can talk about. Can you tell us what you're doing, what you've just done, what you're going to do, how you're going to make the world better for all of us?
Yeah, I think we're actually almost running out of time. So I was going to shoot that same question to you of what's next. But for me, I did a Netflix thriller last year called Ivy, and it's almost done. So that was exciting. And again, like a huge learning thing. And I'm starting to go back to just developing my own stuff again, because Ivy really ate up. Plus the launch of Night Raiders was really all of last year for me. So I'm really happy to finally be back to sort of like digging into new ideas and into the next thing. And what about you? What is next for you?
I'm going, I have my new short Auntie world premiering at Aspen Shorts Fest, which is exciting. And I'm developing that.
Congrats.
Thank you so much. I'm developing that into a feature with Powder Keg, which is also very exciting. That'll be a process as well.
That's amazing.
Very blessed. And I'm looking to shoot my first feature, hopefully at the end of this year. It's telefilm funded. Always looking for more money, but that's called Me, My Mom, and Sharmila, which I wrote and will direct my feature debut. And that's very much a love letter to my mother. It'll be shot in Sydney and Pakistan, in Karachi. My wife is a producer on it. We have some great Nova Scotia producers as well. And I'm in the Canadian Academy of Women Directors program. And so looking to really break into TV as well and break into the episodic space. So we'll be shadowing my first TV show this year in Canada. So lots to look forward to, lots to be patient with. And what a blessing. I mean, I don't know why I feel emotional all of a sudden, but I just feel blessed to get to share this space with you and hear your journey. And I didn't get to hear you speak when you spoke to the Canadian Academy. So I feel like the universe bestowed this moment for us to get to connect in this way. And it's been a true honor to just share space with you in this conversation.
I feel the same way. And I also felt at many moments feeling emotional as we were talking, just because, like, when you look back on your journey and all of the things that, you know, we've had to come up against in this crazy industry, it's like, yeah, there's a lot, you know, there's a lot that is a challenge. And so those moments where you really get to come together with other folks that are, you know, on similar paths, it's like really joyful. And so thank you so much for this conversation. It's been such a pleasure to get to know you. And to everybody listening, thank you so much for being here. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.